All right, we have some Zeta 6 speed loaders. I think that's how they're pronounced. These were sent to me by Greg Newton over on Line Quest Fitness, so I appreciate that very much. He sent me some of these over just to kind of do a little bit of a review on them because I'm one of the Revolver guys on YouTube here. So he sent me over some speed strips, some speed loaders, and well, this is sort of in between that. This is actually for a K-frame. I don't have a K-frame, so I'm not really going to be able to show much about that, but these are J-frame 5-shots, and we have some speed strips that one has a tab on one end, the other one has a tab on both ends here. So really interesting products. Now I don't really have anything to lose or gain by reviewing these, so I'm definitely going to give an honest opinion on these. Now the first thing that stands out to me when I see these is this one. Very interesting speed loader here. It's one of those things where you see it and you're like, duh, why didn't I think of that? It's one of the simplest things I've never even thought of over the years, of being able to take something that's like a speed strip and put it into a circular orientation like a speed loader. It is very interesting, and this is pretty much our go-to standard for speed loaders is the HKS. So it lines up just like an HKS would do, but we have pretty much no speed loader there. We just have this little tab. That's very interesting because normally when we're talking speed loaders, we have this big device. Now what I find interesting, I've messed around with these a little bit. I haven't live fired or loaded with them yet, but when we talk about the HKS, the main thing about the HKS is that you're manipulating the body of this device. That's the main thing that you feel, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing. You have to kind of manipulate that and get those rounds in there. Now with this speed loader, what I found is that you pretty much want to have it so that this tab comes between your fingers here like this. And the main thing that I notice about this is that you're manipulating the actual rounds themselves. It's a much more hands-on feel. So rather than trying to figure out how to work a device, you're going back to your natural instinct of how to load ammunition, but instead of one, you have 5. So you're just hands-on with the ammunition. Put them in, and then you just pull that strip off. A little bit interesting of a design, but I could definitely see some advantages to it. Main thing is the size of these. This is a big old device here. You definitely have probably 4 to 5 of these to add up to one of these. So that's definitely an advantage. So I could definitely see how having a lot more reloads will be a lot easier with something like this. Now when we look at the speed strip, these were actually really impressive to me. And I brought out just your standard run-of-the-mill speed strip. This happens to be a Supervel brand. The main thing I noticed about traditional old speed strips is this. They're not really built very well. They're just kind of interesting how weak they are. When I look at the Zeta 6 strips, it's very solid. It doesn't wiggle around at all. So that's really, really nice. So if I were to compare this traditional one, this is kind of, I can see disadvantages immediately with these lesser built ones because they're spreading. And they're spreading, they're not going to line up to your particular revolver. I'll just use this Taurus 605. Easier for me to handle right now, but now you have to push them around and wiggle them around. See that? That's definitely not a good thing for your traditional ones. That's why I don't really use those. But if we take a look at one of these Zeta 6s, they stay lined up. And that's just a very simple little thing, but it makes all the difference in the world. So that's definitely an advantage there to have something solid. So again, we have the single tab. Try to load this. This is actually meant for a J-frame, and the Taurus 605 is a little bit larger than a J-frame, but it's still close enough to pretty much work. Works pretty well with that single tab one. Double tab, for some reason I feel like a little bit different with this double tab one, where it just doesn't want to line up exactly right with the Taurus. That's where that single tab one did want to line up with the Taurus perfectly fine. But again, it is made for a Smith & Wesson J-frame, so I will try that with the J-frame. That was my fault. So it looks like in between here, what the design of this is going to be, this is a little bit bigger of a gap. It looks like it's specifically designed to flip it around, rather than just go all the way around in a circle like the single tab one would be. So, because we see a little bit of a gap right here, so my guess is it's meant to go like this and then flip around. I don't know what the design purpose of that would be, but that just seems to be how it seems to be fitting my particular revolvers. Now, when we look at this type of thing over here, this is an interesting thing. This is made for a K-frame, which I don't have a K-frame. I have an L-frame, but I didn't bring it out because I didn't think it would adequately work very well either. But what we basically have is 2 moon clips here. And I messed around with my L-frame and it worked okay. Basically, you go around, you put 3 in like this. And I'll pull this revolver over to show the other 3. And then you can flip it around, and then you have a second half moon clip. Again, it's interesting. I don't know the entire purpose for it, but it's more or less, my guess would be just to make the length of the loader not as long, because we see it's a little bit shorter. So we just kind of, it's kind of like a double stack speed strip, which is interesting. But overall, when I'm looking at these products, you know, the thing I've noticed here with these is they are actually more specific to a particular model than even these HKSs. So that's something to keep in mind if you want to get these Zeta strips. You want to make sure to get the exact frame or the exact size, because they're not going to necessarily fit exactly every 5-shot revolver the same. And this one is listed for a Smith & Wesson J frame here, and I'll just try to show this here. So it's a little bit off size for the Toro 605, and I can take this HKS and it fits it perfectly, pretty much perfectly. And that's because we're only working with the tips of these rounds before we drop them. The 605, the cylinder is a little bit larger in the back than a J-frame, just a little bit. So what that means is these are designed to be pushed in all the way before they're stripped off. So while that will work perfectly fine in the gun it's intended for, the J-frame, we can push it in all the way and strip it off. If you try to do that with the Toro 605 here, what happens is you can see right here how it's not going to push in all the way. It'll still work, but you'd have to tear them off like this rather than push them in all the way. I think it's a little bit more secure of a feel to put them all the way into the chambers you're loading before you strip it off, because that's one of the big complaints I have with the HKS speed loaders is when I try to load them or do a reload quickly, I can't count the amount of times that I have put the speed loader in. I'll try to illustrate this here real quick, where I've tried to put them in and then I'll drop around, because you're dropping them only halfway in. So I can't count the amount of times I've pulled it away and then done that. So hopefully with the Zeta strip here, because it's something you push in all the way before you pull that tab off, that could eliminate it if you get the technique down a little bit. So I'm going to do a little bit of live fire with these just to kind of see how they feel for me and just kind of compare it to the HKS, and we'll see how they do. Now, one cool advantage I found with this particular Zeta loaders is that your typical HKS loaders, they're a big product and they're not hard to load, but you kind of can fumble with them a little bit. I found that these Zeta strips would be kind of a cool thing to have, even if you're not going to use them for a practical carry purpose. They're really easy to load because you can set them right on the table and then push your rounds into them. So if you wanted to have a ton of these already loaded just for range practice, I think that in and of itself would be a really cool thing to have, because you could have a whole bunch of these loaded up. It'd be easier to load them while you're on the range. So I'm going to do a couple of reloads with these. I'm just going to do one with the HKS, and I'm going to do one with the Zeta strip. Just kind of see how they compare for me. I'm 7 yards from the target, so let's see how they do. Alright, I don't shoot my J-frame very much, so don't critique my accuracy too much, but I'll just do kind of a slow reload with both of these and see how they compare. HKS. Again, I want to grab onto the tab or the knob of this rather than a more natural feel, even though I know it's probably better to hold it like this. I always go back to doing this. It's just something I can't really get around. So we'll try the Zeta strip next here. I'll do it one more time here. It's something that takes a little bit of practice. That one went a little bit smoother for me. So definitely what I'm seeing here is my natural desire with this is to pull it back to the body, because you kind of get that feeling like they're loose rounds even though they're held in really tight. But it's not a bad thing because it helps to stabilize that reload. So rather than coming out with the HKS and the natural thing is, well, these are held in good, I'm just going to do this. With these I have the natural feel that I want to do this, which is definitely not necessarily a bad thing. Alright, I have a speed loader pouch. I have one of each in here. I'm going to do a reload with the HKS. Then I'm going to switch on to the Zeta strip. I'm just going to do what I feel natural to me for comparing these two different loader styles. Again, I feel like I have to grab that tab. Go into the Zeta strip here. Again, I feel naturally doing this is the best route to do with these. Alright, not too bad. So my overall takeaway with these particular rounded strips is I think they are equally as good as the HKS. I don't really feel like there's necessarily an advantage or a disadvantage, but we're working with a lot less loader here, and it's doing the job of this. Doing the job of this, but with this. So I'm going to try the speed strips and see how those do for me. Alright, with the speed strips, I'm going to compare the traditional style to the Zeta. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull them out of the pocket and try to do a reload. Basically in my front pocket. This is probably how a lot of people carry it. Probably carry something like this on their side and inside or outside the waistband, and then they'll put on their strong hand side their reload. So I'll see how these super valves do for me. Alright, I felt a little questionable whether those are going to stay in that speed strip, so now I'll try the Zeta strips. Right, here's the Zeta strips. Yeah, those definitely felt a lot more solid to me, more solid of a product overall compared to your traditional style strips. So definitely better. So my takeaway from this is I think these are as good as the HKS. They do everything the HKS does. Maybe the only downside would be the tab might be hard to fit in a speed loader pouch, but if you're just going to throw these in your pocket, I think these will stay. They're clipped in there pretty good. Now as far as the speed strips go, these are definitely 100 times better than anything else out there. So these are excellent. These are as good as the HKS, but like I said, there's positives and there's negatives to everything. But one of the main takeaway positives I'm seeing here, two of them. One is you can load them on your table for just target practice, and number two, you can have a lot of them pretty easily, but the main one, this will be number three, the main one is that you feel a sense of the rounds themselves in your hands. You can kind of squish them around to however you feel they need to be at that moment. So you can have them back here like this. To me, that feels good to me. So that's what you get today. That's just my review of these Zeta strips and loaders. I haven't had a lot of time with them, but overall I'm gonna say it's a solid product. So that's what you get today, and thank you to LionQuest Fitness, Greg Newton. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.